did that.
Ashley Madison.
Yeah, that could be. And there was one.
He actually had met a woman named Ashley Madison and was going to visit her. Not the dating website.
Yeah.
He just met an actual person.
Well, if you're going to have a dating website, I mean, if you're going to be a skis and have a dating profile while you're married, it behooves you to have your dating profile say you live in a different place.
Yeah.
So that if your wife, for some reason, also has a dating profile,
she's less likely to find you.
Or if she goes on to find you, you know.
Wouldn't that be rude? And speaking of which, I'm sure there's got to be at least several women in America named Ashley Madison.
There are.
I mean, how do they feel about it? I wonder.
They hate it.
Oh, I bet they do. Okay, where are we at? Either that or they really are having a great time. Okay, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, which is a possible stressor in Luna's life, which is the year before, in 2002, he was prosecuting a bank robbery case. And some cash was brought into the courtroom as evidence in 3 large plastic bags. And at the end of the day, Luna and an FBI agent had to take it to the vault, the evidence vault in the courthouse. Well, 10 days later, it was discovered that one of those bags was missing, had $38,100 in it. There was a little scandal about that, made its way into the press, and everybody came under suspicion, including Luna. Even the judge was interviewed by the FBI. The FBI being federal courthouse, FBI jurisdiction.
Yep.
So they were investigating this. The investigation was still ongoing, everybody. And according to leaks from law enforcement, Luna was about to get polygraphed himself for this particular thing. And so that may have been a stressor in his life.
Okay.
Now, I personally don't think he stole the money.
But he might be stressed that this is a giant screw-up and a black mark on his record.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was the last person to be in possession besides that FBI agent. So, yeah. And then one other law enforcement leak came out. It turns out that law enforcement discovered that Luna had filled out an online application for a loan for about $30,000 in 2002. And apparently he canceled the application right about the time that the money disappeared. That looked a little suspicious. And by the way, this is like all these leaks, so I guess I'll give away the game now. All these leaks, in the eyes of some people, looked almost kind of concerted, almost as if law enforcement was trying to trash Luna's reputation. Of course, that doesn't
intentional quote-unquote leaks.
Yeah, that there could have been a motive and some sort of coordination behind these. I'm not sure that's
We've never
true.
seen that with a government operation before.
Oh, never, ever. Yeah. Along about this time, about early March, law enforcement began floating the possibility that he might have killed himself. Up to this point, everybody was sure it was murder, and now suddenly they're saying maybe he killed himself. And there were stories in the press, New York Times, Washington Post, right about this time, including quotes from famous pathologists like Dr. Henry Lee. You guys have all heard of him, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and one other guy who I forget, stating that the shallow prick marks from the knife probably were hesitation wounds. So let's sum up the theory there for suicide. He was deep in debt, married shaky, suspected of the theft of all this cash, which at the very least were going to damage his career probably, if there were suspicions about that. And I heard also that he and his boss didn't like each other. His boss really didn't like him, wanted to fire him, although the boss won't comment on it. He obviously was asked by reporters.
Smartly.
So was all this stuff enough to kill himself over? Well, I don't know. Not necessarily in my book. But there was one other thing that was going on when he went on his last big ride. And that was, of course, we talked about the trial of Dion Smith and Walter Poindexter for heroin traffic. So, and Walter Poindexter, by the way, was going to be tried later for murder, drug-related murder, and Luna was also going to prosecute that. And this is serious stuff. Smith was looking at several decades in prison, Poindexter, death penalty. And so, big thing. Essentially, Dion Smith was a mid-level drug supplier in Baltimore. Poindexter bought from him and used that to supply his street-level guys, the guys on the corner. And he had a star dealer named Warren Grace. Warren got arrested, was facing huge amounts of time, and offered to essentially squeal on both Smith and Poindexter.
Becomes state's evidence.
Yeah, essentially. So the Baltimore PD turned it over to the FBI, the Justice Department. So there was an FBI agent named Steve Skinner who was running that. We're going to run him as an informant.
Skinner?
Agent Skinner, yeah.
From the X-Files?
Yep, I know.
That guy?
I made the same association right away. That poor guy, I'm sure he gets that constantly. I found him on LinkedIn. I think he's still with the FBI.
Full head of hair.
Yeah. And so Luna was supervising this whole operation, and he dropped a couple of charges against Warren just to show his goodwill, and then Warren agreed to be their informant against these two. He pleaded guilty to charges of possession and gun possession also, and he was remanded to a halfway house until he was sentenced. Now, in the meantime, he's going to be their snitch, and he's going to wear a wire and everything. And they had a written agreement. He was going to not use any guns and not engage in violence. He was going to not use drugs or sell drugs. He's going to not leave the halfway house without FBI permission. He's going to wear an ankle bracelet. And of course, he broke every one of those rules. Every single one of them. He was out, no time at all. He was out shooting up the neighborhood and selling drugs and all that stuff.
Back to his old habits.
Yeah. So he was. It's kind of ironic, that he was their special informant, and they were really overlooking all this stuff because he was wearing a wire and getting some good information on Smith and Poindexter. So, but at some point, it seems to me like they got their priorities a little skewed because, here's Warren, who is at least as big a menace to society as these two guys who are trying to put in jail. and they're kind of covering for him while they're trying to lock these other two guys up.
It's a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah, it's not good.
No, it really wasn't a good situation. But anyway, Smith and Poindexter were arrested May 2003, both for heroin possession and trafficking. Of course, Walter Poindexter arrested for murder. That was the murder of a guy named Alvin Jones, drug-related, as I said. And it was decided they would be tried together for the drug charges, and then immediately right after that, Poindexter would be charged for the murder, also prosecuted by Jonathan Luna. Well, the trial for the drug charges began December 1st, 2003, which is just 2 days before Jonathan Luna's last ride. This case should have been a slam dunk for the prosecution. They had tons of audio tape of both Smith and Poindexter saying all kinds of incriminating things. And of course, they had Warren Grace's testimony.
Their star
witness. But unfortunately for the prosecution, Warren did not turn out to be as credible a witness as everybody had hoped.
What?
Yeah, believe it or not. Jonathan Luna approached the defense team at lunchtime on Wednesday, December 3rd, and offered them a plea deal. And that's the one he was working on the night that he disappeared. So this was what's going on in his life the day that he left Baltimore for his big long car ride. And did it have a bearing on him winding up dead? Well, maybe. We got to talk about all that in our theories. But before we go to theories, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
This week's episode is sponsored by Warby Parker, purveyors of fine eyewear. So here's the deal with Warby Parker. Their glasses start at $95. That includes the prescription lenses, and those lenses include anti-glare and anti-scratch coatings, which are great because I, like most people, wear glasses, and I'm also in front of a computer, so the anti-glare is awesome. For every pair you buy, by the way, a pair is distributed to someone in need. Now, Warby Parker is making buying glasses online easy and risk-free with their Try-On Home program, which allows you to order 5 pairs of glasses, have them shipped directly to your door, where you get to try them on in the comfort of family, the mailman, the internet, if you're into that kind of thing. Anybody can give you feedback on them, and you get to try those 5 frames for 5 days before sending them back using a prepaid return shipping label, which, of course, there's no obligation to buy anything. It's 100% free. It is so easy that a cat can do it. And by that, I mean, seriously, a cat can do it. I have a cat. She's a ding-dong. I had to order glasses just to prove a point. I brought Ginger Cat in here. I made her push the submit order button. It worked perfectly. So, look at that. And by the way, I really do love my new Warby Parker glasses because they look good and they fit good. I just look good. Hey, so here's what you need to do. You need to head to warbyparker.com/sideways to order your free home try-ons today. Choose the 5 frames you'd like to try on, choose your favorite pair or pairs, and have your prescription added to the order. And Warby Parker makes your experience completely risk-free because, the shipping is free and it's just awesome. So visit warbyparker.com/sideways to begin your home try-on experience today. And by the way, are you one of those cool people who has the iPhone X? If you do, you can get the Warby Parker app and use the Find Your Fit feature, which is this crazy thing where it uses the true depth cameras in the iPhone X to map your face and head and measure some facial feature things. And then it will recommend about 12 pairs of glasses from Warby Parker that would look great and fit your face. That process is seamless and it only takes a couple of seconds. So again, go to warbyparker.com/sideways and get your home try-on experience started today.
And we're back. So we've got three basic theories here. There were before, but Chupi had an alibi for that night. So sorry, Chupi haters, but yeah, there it is.
Yeah, he was working with the Pinkertons that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there were. The theories are it was murder, or
It was murder.
Suicide. Yeah, or it was other murder, or it was different murder.
I apologize.
Yeah, there's that.
Go ahead and keep going. So it's murder or suicide.
or maybe an accident.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting accident, but still, there's a sort of plausible theory for an accident. So let's talk about murder first. We like murder the best, so we talk about it first. And law enforcement had three different sort of trains of thought they were following here. One is that, of course, murdered over his job, some vengeful ex-con, or perhaps somebody on trial right now, decided to have him whacked. Or, second, maybe somebody he'd met online. They pursued that line of thought. Or maybe he just happened to have the bad luck to run into a serial killer. He went out for a drive to clear his head, gathered thoughts.
That one,
Yeah.
no. That one gets taped onto everything unless you not use that.
No, I'm ruling it out because, first of all, I think a serial killer would have chosen a better weapon. Don't you think? Yeah.
The penknife serial killer.
Yeah. Well, as for the online dating stuff, well, they never found any good leads or real evidence or suspects in that either. And again, I don't know exactly what he was up to. I mean, for all I know, law enforcement lied about the dating website stuff, or maybe it was from back before he was married. That doesn't really make any sense. 1993, maybe not. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, they've been married for quite a few years.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. But and that leaves revenge for a previous prosecution.
Which is totally plausible.
It's
Because he
plausible.
put a lot of people away, and that pisses a lot of people off.
It really does. Although it would be kind of a coincidence that he happened to exact his revenge on the exact day that his career, Jonathan Luna's career, kind of hit a low point.
Well, but okay. So I will
it's
object
not.
to that right now because we're using legal terminology and say that phrase because you could say that his career was kind of imploding for the year after that money went missing. If he had been killed or died 4 months prior to that, we would probably be saying, well, and obviously his career was on a downturn because he had this other, there's cases that always go not according to plan.
Well, as far as his career went, the money wasn't his big problem. But we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. It could be that Smith and Poindexter, who were on trial just then, had ordered a hit on Luna based on the dumb criminal reasoning that if the prosecutor is killed, then the prosecution goes away.
Isn't that how it works?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I don't have as much of a problem with it being involved with that case as I think a lot of other people do because in my mind, they're a part of gangs.
Yeah.
It's not as though they were just these two men who happened to
they're part of an organization.
They were part of an organization, and granted, they knew, and their lawyers knew that they were about to get a really good plea deal, but it could have looked from the outside as though it was obvious that Warren had snitched, and they were like, well, these guys are going to snitch too, and we have to get rid of the prosecution for some reason. That makes sense. Or it could have been that it looked like to them that the way that logic follows, right? It's not a good logic, but that getting rid of the prosecutor means getting rid of the prosecution.
Yeah.
And that it looked like from the outside that these guys were going to go away for a really long time. Maybe even one of them was going to have the death penalty enforced on them. And to some outside gang member, it was worth killing this guy to get rid of that possibility.
Maybe.
I don't think the plea deal itself negates their threat or somebody that they cared about them threat.
It would, it would take a remarkably dumb criminal to think. But maybe the thinking process was like, well, if we whack the prosecutor, then any other prosecutor will be afraid to take this case, and so they'll just decide to plead it out or drop it.
Criminals are often very dumb.
And listen, we have seen that work. I mean, if you think about all of the judge killings that happened in South America for years and years, the guys who would prosecute drug cases.
That's how Pablo Escobar operated.
Yeah.
It worked
and
really well for him for a long
nobody
time.
would prosecute. I mean, so this thinking is out there, and there is a set logic to prove that sometimes it works.
Yeah.
I think this is a little early in the process to try to exact that
Agreed.
action, but
Yeah, these guys were not big enough or rich enough. They weren't Pablo Escobar. You know, they just
Well,
weren't. Yeah.
in fairness, Pablo Escobar wasn't always Pablo Escobar.
No, he started out small too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So they could have been the next Pablo Escobar.
Maybe they were angling to be Pablo.
Maybe.
Yeah, I hope not, because we don't need that here. But there is one problem I have with the murder theory, which is that, as I mentioned before, no evidence was found in the car that suggests that anybody had been in it. Tire tracks don't indicate a second vehicle. Footprints, like say in the mud at the edge of the creek, that didn't belong to Jonathan Luna.
Yeah.
So-
I guess I also don't have as big a problem with that as you do, because
Yeah.
there's so much time unaccounted for in his night.
Yeah.
And particularly near the end of his night,
Uh-huh.
that we don't. It's possible that he could have, been meeting somebody on the side of the road, gotten stabbed a bunch, hopped back in his car, or fallen into his car, or whatever,
and knocked
drove
it in drive,
and then
Yeah.
been like,
automatic.
oh god, been super disoriented and kind of run
There-
into a.
Yeah, I mean, there is that possibility. I mean, it does. The evidence does indicate, like I said, that he drove behind the building and then stopped the car, and then the car
Wow.
goes again and goes into the creek. So maybe somebody attacks him there
Yeah.
at that spot where he stopped. And then he drives
I
into
had the
creek.
exact same thought that
Yeah.
the fight goes on. I still think the blood in the back seat is
That's-
the thing that makes me think
Yeah.
that he had to have been in the back seat, because if it's his hands and then his neck and all of that, there would have to be a lot of blood soaking through the seat for it to have reached the back of the car on the
Yeah.
floorboard.
Well, if it's a
So it
bucket
indicates
seat,
that-
it can kind of go down between the back and the bottom of
Yeah,
the seat.
okay, but
you know?
to me it indicates more that he was in the rear of the car for some reason. So then whatever happens, whoever does it walks away, and then he clambers his way into the driver's seat to try and get away, but all he's able to do is, as we just said, knock it into gear, and the car just idles forward until it thunks off the edge,
And then he gets out.
and it gets high-centered and can't keep going.
Yeah, and he gets out and stumbles into the creek or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
that
it's
girl
awful.
that wrecked in front of my house. He gets out all drunkenly, tries to figure out what's going on, except he is literally dying
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
falls off the edge of the creek.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I don't
then,
know.
but then there's the knife. So what happens is that maybe the killer walks up to him, and where he's laying face down in the mud and the water, and drops the knife next to him. Maybe.
Well, they didn't find
Or-
it until 6 weeks later.
Yeah.
It could have been planted, or that
Yeah.
could have also not been the murder weapon. We don't know.
Could have been a random pen knife. Yeah.
It could have been one that he had in his breast pocket all the time and just fell out as he fell. And
And it was neutrally buoyant, like hard drives, and so it
Yeah.
floated it floated a while downstream.
Yeah, speaking of hard drives that are lost and found, this one did sort of happen right around the time that Ray Gricker disappeared.
Yeah, it did.
Also.
Yeah, Mr. Greekar.
There were a few people that did actually draw some
Oh
lines
yeah,
in between
believe me,
these cases.
suggestions for the Luna case came in like wildfire
Yeah.
after we did the
After Ray
Greeker.
Gricker. Yeah, I know. Well, so that's it for murder for now, but let's go on to something else. Accident. This is a hypothesis that law enforcement came up with, which was a given his problems, especially with the cash thing and everything else. But Luna might have staged his own abduction in a ploy to kind of gain sympathy and maybe divert some attention from his poor performance in the trial that was going on that week, and also, of course, the whole money thing.
yeah,
And even if he wasn't guilty of stealing the money, just for me, taking a polygraph, especially something that could be a kind of career-ending kind of thing, would be stressful enough. Even
well,
if
especially because it turns out polygraphs
Are
not so accurate.
No, they're not. They're not at all.
Yeah.
All they measure is how nervous you are, not how truthful you are.
Yeah.
So it really isn't fair in a lot of ways. Perhaps he takes a drive to clear his head a little bit, hatches this idea of faking an abduction, gets out his pocket knife, starts sticking himself to make it look like he'd been tortured, by his abductor.
Cutting his hands up.
Yeah. He drives around until he finds a suitable place where he stabs himself more deeply to make it look like a real attempted murder. But unfortunately for him, he screwed up and severed his carotid artery. Starts bleeding like a stuck pig. Whoops, didn't mean to do that exactly. And of course, as you know, if you cut the carotid artery, not only do you bleed a lot, but your blood flow to your brain,
Yeah,
Is cut off.
yeah.
It's diverted.
pretty much.
Well, it's
yeah.
diverted. I mean, you've still got the one on the other side but still,
You're at 50% capacity.
that's not good.
No.
Not good at all.
That's
So,
not what you want.
Yeah, he might not have been too clear-headed in his final moments, but that might explain why the car winds up partially in the ditch and he winds up face down. Maybe he thought it'd be a good idea to get out and stumble into the ditch for some reason. Again, his brain probably wasn't working at capacity.
So
Trips, falls down. You know.
Listen, I can see where this theory is going. This is much like what's his name, Anthony Weiner years ago when he said I was hiking the Appalachian Trail because it was the first thing that he thought of to try to get out of trouble. And this could be the same thing. Ray